Herlock, and you're very welcome, Minister, again to the House. Every year in Ireland there comes a day when women's earnings stop and when men's earnings keep going to the end of the year, effectively at least, because women do earn less than men in this country, 14% less. Last year that date was November the 9th. And this is often explained away as it is not necessarily that a man and a woman doing the same job are earning less than each other, but that women and men may be engaged in different kinds of work. So it is often the conditions of their working lives that a light is being shone on. Women often have periods of uncertainty or they look for flexibility. This isn't weakness, it is reality. We have babies. We sometimes want to be at home, we sometimes want flexible working, and we also want to feed our families and not to live in poverty. We should never be forced into caring roles because of a lack of childcare. And that cost of childcare is, I know, being addressed by this government and by yourself, Minister, or through direct discrimination, as is what happens when workplaces simply pay us less, or when they subconsciously don't think that we look or sound like what they expect from a worker in a particular role. And that's particularly roles that are at the higher end, and they are the roles that pay more. There are certainly cases that are brought to the Workplace Relations Commission where women have been asked at interview if they plan to have children, for instance, and I know of one woman who was asked that and didn't take a case. The implication being that they might not have what it takes to stay the course. But the personal rewards for taking these cases are often nowhere near enough to prompt employees to do it. It's not enough for us as a society to say, well, tut tut, that should never happen. You have your rights under the workplace relations or under equality legislation, and you should go off and take a case. But to put in place safeguards to ensure that it doesn't happen in the first place, and that's what this bill is about. We should not rely on the courts as individuals to vindicate our rights under equality legislation, but to put a greater onus on the state and on employers to demonstrate compliance with a set of principles, that set of principles being laid down in part by this legislation. And there are many practices that, quite apart from this direct discrimination, also indirectly discrimination. I think it's interesting if you look at the CEO of Reddit, for instance, she's banned salary negotiations at her company altogether because salary negotiations indirectly discriminate against women. Why? Because over our lifetime we continuously earn less in each employment that we're in. And therefore, when we go in and we are obliged to say what we were earning in our past employment, we therefore, in our next employment, doing the exact same role as a man in that role, then end up, because of our own negotiations, or we're certainly put in the driving seat, we actually end up earning less. And I note that the Irish Public Appointments Service does ask for previous salaries for senior appointments in the public service. And it might make sense, Minister, that we reform the public service recruitment processes as an early step in order to do more than just publish the information, but to act to reduce it beyond transparency measures. And I would also say, Minister, that, and you'll know that I am the spokesperson for the Green Party in relation to higher education. And if we look at apprenticeships, for instance, in this country, only 5% of apprenticeships are taken up by women. And that means that we're not doing enough as a state to promote it amongst women, and that we are continuing to say that some forms of work are for women and that some forms of work are for men. But the real question is, why is the work that women engaged in paying less than women? Why is it that the working world is often set up to maximise profit instead of to ensure that all work done in a sustainable way is done in a sustainable way, and that people of all genders and their children earn enough, regardless of whether they're paid employment, unpaid employment, whether they're in caring roles or in other forms of roles, that we are all paid the same, and that we all ensure that we can make a living for our children and for our families, and that the kinds of work that we are engaged in isn't something to be ashamed of. I shouldn't have to feel that if I work in a creche, I should feel that I'm any less than somebody who is working in a male-dominated profession. And unfortunately, that is where we are as a society. And I think that if we genuinely want to encourage more men into some roles, then we need to start showing that it's valued. And I can guarantee you that men would step up to the plate in those roles if they felt that there was that it was a valued profession. And you will also know, Minister, how much I speak on the issue of unpaid caring labour, and I know that that's not what this bill is here to address, but it is actually at the core of the gender pay gap, because women take extensive time out of work. And we need to look at the measures to promote women going back into the workforce in small businesses as well as in large, because this country, we do have a reliance on small to medium-sized businesses. So we have to look at how do we support businesses to take women back and to value the experience that they've had. LinkedIn, very recently, and during the pandemic, which I thought was notable, now is putting that emphasis on work that is at home, and you can now put into your profile that you're a stay-at-home parent, for instance. That means that we are now stepping up as a society. The Citizens' Assembly, as you said, has recognised the importance of caring work as well. And in order to promote and to help those who are in caring work, we need to make sure that the people who are in caring work are not living in poverty, but more particularly that their children are not living in poverty. An awful lot of damage was done with tax individualisation, and it's very hard to roll back on tax individualisation. But there is also lone parents, and damage was done in previous governments in relation to lone parents. And we have to recognise all of that and to work our way to ensuring that we try to redress that balance so that people, regardless of where they work, in the home, outside the home, can make choices that are based on something other than the financial imperatives and actually putting food on the table. But I think that this bill is a huge step forward. It's in line with many other countries, and it's also a large part of what the Citizens' Assembly examined and encouraged the government to do. And I look forward to the referenda as well, or at least a referendum with several questions in it, which I hope that we will pursue in the lifetime of this government as well. Thank you very much, Minister.